Welcome to the DMF. I am your host, Justin Yachts, and today I have a special interview with Christopher Renshaw. This is part one. He is a Tony-nominated director. He also directed the show Taboo on Broadway, and enjoy. Okay, today I have a special guest with me today. I have Christopher Renshaw. He is a director. He is a Tony-nominated director, Drama Desk Award, opera, musical theater, The King and I. He's done so many things. How are you doing today, sir?
Very good, and you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So, in doing my research with you, I found out that you grew up in Reading, England. How do you think that shaped your directing style, if
Reading
at
is kind.
all?
Oh God, if at all. I mean, Reading's only famous for about three things. I mean, one is obviously where Oscar Wilde went to prison and wrote De Profundis. I think the other one is I think Kate Winslet was born there.
Really?
And the other one is that we had a very good biscuit. I mean, in your language, cookie manufacturer. Apart from that, there's not much else happening in Reading. So it was. I apologize to Reading. But it's a place you kind of can't wait to get out of. If it was. I couldn't wait to get to somewhere else. So that's how it grew up. That's how I grew up.
Do you think it influenced the directing style at all, or anything in your creative, or was it just I just want to get out of here as soon as possible?
No. I mean, to tell you the truth, I went to an all boys school, what we call a grammar school, which is kind of like a public school. Which in American means a private school. Go figure. Two languages that are so different. But I went to an all boys school where sports were obviously quite important. I was useless at them, so I was kind of forced into thinking of something else. So I suppose how it influenced me was it made me a sort of weak-looking, scrappy boy, scrawny boy, think of other things I could shine in. So I learned to play the piano. I started acting. I even started directing when I was still at school. I was desperate to find my place, which is so interesting about that kind of awful education. You know, it kind of forces some people into other directions because they don't quite fit into the main direction. But I did do amazing things. I played Prospero. I played Jimmy Porter in Look Back in Anger, and I directed my first opera when I was 15 there. So I guess I can't be so rude about Reading.
That's one of the things I was fascinated about, is that you did a look back in anger, because that's one of my monologues that I was given as
we,
is a look back in anger.
we, my main reason was to show off and smoke a pipe on stage and say a four-letter word. That was kind of my big turn on, because God, then this was in the 60s. I don't know. It was. I don't know when he wrote it, but it was then still really daring. So I think I did it for shock value, actually. And then the local girls' school. Usually we were all playing the ladies' parts, real typical boys' school. So I don't know whether that happens in this country, but we had to wear our mother's bras and put rugby socks in them.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I mean, what chance does a lad have,
I mean, today I don't know if you would be able to get away with that because it's so taboo now. Yes. We you would be raked under the coals for doing something like that. So I don't know. Maybe you could get away with that. It's interesting though. Look Back in Anger. When I read it, it's very I think it's very applicable to the times, what was happening, because it's like right after World War II. And I feel it reflects kind of the culture of like a changing of that. Do you think that's why it resonated so well in England?
Yeah, there's the broken youth, the youth with nowhere to go. I mean, 'twas ever thus, and I wonder if perhaps the world has changed. now? Is there more places to go, more things to do? You know, his famous liner is, "There's no good causes left anymore." Perhaps there are good causes. I mean, it's weird he said that, but that was that post-war kind of feeling that it was the end of culture. Perhaps it is a better world now. I don't know. Perhaps there are good causes now.
Interesting. Now, I wanted to backtrack a little bit. In doing my research, I found that you had polio, but you had it after it was no longer ruled a pandemic. Yeah. Now, you talked about losing your toys. Was that, I mean, for me personally, that would have been soul crushing. Was that soul crushing?
Yes. It's one of those things when I go to therapy, you know, it's a very good thing to bring up with your therapist. They love that one. But my toys were burnt because they might have been infected. Where have you found that out about me? I didn't tell you that, did I?
Just doing research, sir.
Oh,
my job.
Wow. Yeah, it was after polio was almost gone, and a few kids got it, and it was kind of weird, and it was very late, and I got it. I was completely paralyzed. Went to the hospital for, I mean, I sort of remember being there for 3 months or so, and yes, my toys were burnt. I mean, not in front of me.
Oh, okay.
That's good. all my little rabbits and teddy bears had to be destroyed. End of the world. But in return, I was promised a dog, a little puppy. So I got in, you know, who I met when I came out of hospital. So that was a positive thing.
So they kind of gave you that caveat, you know, it's like, okay, get rid of the toys, but we're gonna get you a puppy.
I was offered a train set or a puppy, and I chose a puppy.
That's interesting. Now, you said when you came back from school that, like, because you had a rare blood disease and that caused you to go back to the hospital. And when you came back, you were kind of an oddball. You said that it was, you kind of discovered the arts as an escape from sports. Now, the thing that I was fascinated about was, it doesn't seem like it was the idea of doing sports that scared you. It's more the idea of not being good at it. Was that failing. The thing that was why you didn't really want to take part in it?
Yeah, failure. And I think in those days, I'm sure physical education now has come a long way, but they were only really interested in the kids that were, you know, winning or could go and win school trophies. And so the kids at the back, we used to hide in the locker rooms, and when they were doing diving, we used to go around in circles so that we'd never get. We had all sorts of tricks. But
they go, wait, you haven't taken us yet. We got to go to the back of the line.
And it was kind of a load of misfits at the back. And the other thing one doesn't want to be is one of the, I mean, I don't know the correct word to use, but I didn't want to look like a disaster, or there were awful words they used for kids at the back of the line, which are now not at all good words. But I thought, well, that's not acceptable either. So I've got to find something. So I've got to be clever at something. And so it was acting and playing the piano and the organ. So at one stage, I nearly became a church organist. So I was after anything that could stop me being ridiculed for being not very good at sports. Which I'm sure is a lot of kids. A lot of kids have the same story. I mean, even now, I'm sure that's one of the things.
Absolutely. What was it about the organ that appealed to you? Because that's a fascinating instrument. I mean, there's a lot to learn there. Was it just the complexity,
the power? I mean, the amount of noise you can actually make, and compared to the piano. Are you a pianist? Do you play the piano?
I do play the piano. I wouldn't call myself a pianist. I'm somebody who can accompany himself as he sings.
You know, I used to play, like, I could sort of fake my way through Chopin, you know, some of the bravura pieces, but it used I never had any technique, and my wrists used to hurt because I was just bashing through, not using the correct muscles. With the organ, you don't need any muscles because it's like playing almost like an electric keyboard. So you didn't actually have that physical thing. You're not plucking. It's not a bashing. It's just so I could actually play the organ without hurting my wrists. Go figure. And I was very good at the pedals for some reason. The pedals of the organ I rather enjoyed. I didn't have to look down. I learned properly. So now, kind of like driving, I quite like the pedals of a car. It reminds me of playing the organ.
Yeah. That's funny. So you were experiencing isolation at a very young age. Do you think that the isolation developed your vision for directing because you had to be alone, or?
I think isolation sends you inward. So I suppose so. So you make up stories in your head. And I am quite a good storyteller in my work. And I suppose that as a kid, I didn't have anybody to play with. I didn't like my sister then, and I had a emotionally overbearing mother and a nice dad, but, it wasn't a loving experience. So I guess I was going inward and coming up with my own fantasy lives. So I suppose, yes, isolation produces other things in you. But I do envy kids who had a more fulfilling childhood. I hated childhood. Horrible business.
Now, you said technique kind of eluded you. What did nobody know? Because I assume you were playing by ear, Chopin.
No, I was never good at ear, so I could read almost anything. So I've always had not very good musical ear. But if you put now, not at all, but in those days, you put a piece of music in front of me, I could play it. So but if you asked me to play by ear, I couldn't do it. I had a very good teacher. For where I was, brilliant, amazing person, took a lot of time with me. I know I was good at sight reading.
So is sight reading. So did nobody tell you that, to have more, to slow you down with the technique?
Well, I tried, and I eventually, when I was at college in Oxford, I did go up to London every week to the Royal Academy of Music to have proper piano lessons with a concert pianist. And he was explaining about how it comes from, it all comes from the shoulders and not the arms. And I really understood it, but I think by that stage I was just too lazy and I wasn't practicing. So theatre was more immediate. So as soon as you get into the theatre, it's all quicker. It's all fast. You don't have to plow away at scales and all that stuff.
See, that's the when I was younger, my parents had me do piano, and I would just practice for the recital and just kind of fake my way through it. People think, "Oh wow, he's so good!" Like,
I think we're related. Anything for applause.
But yes. So then, but later on in life, when I got into more singing and acting, I wanted to learn. So then I, had to, learn actual technique, and still to this day, I try to do at least a little bit of piano every day, just to keep that in. One thing that you've talked about is you talk about how you lost your voice, like it broke. How did that? How did it break? Was it just improper technique, or was there something?
Oh no, it's just puberty. So when I was before puberty, I had a really high soprano voice, so I could hit notes that only the great opera singers could sing. I could sing something called a top E flat, and precocious little thing I was. So I could do, this coloratura and the high stuff and sing like Callas and then go with a top E flat, and it actually went in the middle of a concert I was doing, and I was singing a song, and it suddenly went oh, and it sort of everyone thought, oh, what's happened? So my voice, I think I'd been singing over the break, which is very damaging. So if you, as a treble voice soprano, if you keep on singing as your body changes, I think I developed a way of faking a soprano. So anyway, but once it had broken, I think the instrument was so damaged that I can croon, I can sound like a bad Bing Crosby, and that's all I've got really. So I thought, well, that career's over.
Yeah, because you became, you said a countertenor, which is interesting.
That's when I went to Oxford. I desperately wanted to be in the choir. We had a wonderful choir that did recordings and tours, and I thought, oh, that looks fun. Can shine again and not just be a rather bad academic. So the only way I could get in was learning to sing falsetto. So like Little Mary Sunshine in Chicago. So that's what I did, and I wasn't very good, and I sang out of tune, but at least I got my first ever visit to America and sang in, what's it called, Trinity Wall Street, the famous church in Wall Street. So we did a whole tour of the States and sang at Yale, and I did recordings, anything to survive.
Yeah, because your mother pushed you. She pushed you into Oxford.
Yes, I
you
just
went
don't know
to
where you're getting
Magdalene.
Magdalene.
Yeah, Magdalene. Yes,
It's
as a
Magdalene,
music student.
Magdalene. Yeah, it's Magdalene Cambridge and Magdalene Oxford. Go figure. Yes, as a music student, and I was very bad.
But you said you had a personality. That's what kind of led you into it.
Yes, which gradually left, because I was terrible academic. I wasn't very good in the choir. And I suddenly felt, oh my God, this is all running away from me, and I'm going to be and also ran and end up, which is no bad thing, but teaching music. And, I thought, I can't have this. So I decided to direct and conduct an opera, which is what I decided to do. And I guess I've talked about this before. You're going to know everything, aren't you?
Yeah.
I didn't know I talked about it. So I directed and music directed one of Benjamin Britten's church parables in the main church in Oxford, and I got a national review for my direction from the Daily Telegraph, and I said, all right, that's it. I'm going to be an opera director. And packed everything else up. That's a true story. And
now, was everybody understanding about that when they saw that? Were they kind of like, oh yes, go do
what you mean well, I
yes,
mean,
your parents?
Parents, yes, because I wrote to every opera director in London, and a lot of them were gay gentlemen, and this precocious chap from Oxford writes to you and says, I'm 18, I want to become an opera director, can I meet you? So I had many invitations for lunch, which I used to go up on the train, have lunch, have 2 bottles of wine and come back. And it was I met everybody. And I must have had something. I mean, I didn't know anything.
Wow. But, so you were like networking. You were networking without social media.
Well, what could you do in those days? We didn't have internet. So, and the Brits love having boozy lunches. And I mean, so there was this 19-year-old. And I think I met everybody in the opera business then. And then they invited me to rehearsals. And then immediately I left Oxford. Even before, I was offered a post at a wonderful festival called the Glyndebourne Festival, which is terribly, terribly prestigious, and went off there. and I hadn't a clue about anything. I mean, I really didn't know, and I never
Do you
trained. So
did the not knowing, do you think that gave you a vulnerability, or were you somebody that kind of covered it up with either arrogance or no, I know what I'm doing?
yeah, fakery, fake. I remember the only thing that sticks out is can you go and check what the tab cue is? And this is my director telling me, what are the tabs? What's a cue? And I'm sure I asked a helpful stage manager who said, because the tabs are the front curtains, and a cue is when they, oh, got it. So on we went, And I was arrogant, brilliant, probably in a personality way, but really learning on the hoof. And I mean, to tell you the truth, I was nearly fired after my second festival. Peter Hall didn't like me very much. Thought I wasn't quite his type. So I had to sort of start learning again, really, and retain what I could of the push and the drive, and actually learn some technique.
Interesting. So you learned on the job.
Yeah, and I've been often heard saying to young directors, "Oh, that's the best way to learn. Just do it if anybody will let you." And I sometimes regret saying this because I think training is also very important. And I'm not very happy when an actor hasn't been trained. So
yeah,
perhaps that's just bravura, but I never trained as a director. Never.
Interesting. But
perhaps it's evident in my work. I mean, I don't know. You actually saw a play of mine, didn't you? My thing is going click.
I did see. I saw the code, and I'm going to ask you about that as well. One thing, you seem to really love the Gilbert and Sullivan. Like you fell in love with that style of, and you did the Mikado, and you did HEMS Pinafore. What I've heard you talk about the Mikado, but I haven't heard you talk about HEMS Pinafore. What was it about? Yeah, what was it about that? What was that?
But the whole of the, are you familiar with the Gilbert and Sullivan? We kind of grew up on them, and that's when I had my mother's bra on and rugby socks. I played Mabel in the Pirates of Penzance. They were part of our culture then, pre-war and post-war, Second World War, Britain. It was part of our fabric. And at that stage, they were immensely popular. They were, the amateur operatic societies. Everyone was playing Gilbert and Sullivan. There were companies that only did Gilbert and Sullivan. So it was really part of the British culture. And what was fun was to get hold of them as a young rascal and sort of twist them around a bit. So that's what was exciting. I mean, the Pinafore, I just enjoyed because I was taking the how can you say it here, taking the piss, taking the mickey, making fun of the royals, and particularly Prince Charles. And so I had everybody delivering it and all that, which was then very, it was funny, and it hadn't been done then. So I just like taking something that was totally in my heritage, my mum and dad, and everybody knew Gilbert and Sullivan, and twisting it, and just making it more into music theatre rather than operetta. And that's actually how I first got noticed by Cameron Mackintosh, who saw a production of mine and said, Chris, you shouldn't be doing operas, you should be doing musicals. So thank you to Cameron.
Yeah. Do you think, because you've talked about the vision, do you think that your vision started with Gilbert and Sullivan? Did that give you that the deconstructing the classics, as you would say?
I think that's a fair thing to say. And I think when I did The King and I don't know. I mean, I think what happened when I moved away, in opera, as much as I used to love it, all you could really do is make it look weird and set it in a ladies' toilet, and everybody raves about you. I mean, that's opera. I was never any good at that. I did enjoy reversing the Gilbert and Sullivan and trying to get at the real cultural hypocrisy that it had. I don't know what. Yeah, perhaps it did. I mean, The King and I, which obviously changed my career. I went to live in Thailand for 3 years, 3 months before doing it, and I think when I did mine, it was so authentic and respectful of another culture. That's what made that very famous in the 90s, which is almost the reverse of Gilbert and Sullivan, where I'm making fun of a British culture because I'm British and I'm allowed to. Whereas when I tackled The King and I was so in awe of the Thai culture that it was almost reverse. I was almost honoring it and deeply respecting, and I was a more of a fan of the Thais than the woman who comes in and tries to change them. So I don't know. Who knows what grabs us and why we do it?
What was there something going to the King and I? Was there something that you read, or was it just experiencing the culture firsthand that opened the door for how you were gonna do The King and I?
Yeah, I mean, I knew the movie because my mother had taken me to see it. It all comes back to my mother. And Deborah Carr, I always thought looked like my mother, blah, blah, blah. So I knew when I was asked to do it in Australia, I said, oh, yeah, didn't even read it. And it was my designer over there said, Chris, you've got to take this seriously, because he'd done a movie in Thailand. And he said, the Thais are something else. He said, come on. We went off together. And as I said, I was 3 months there and was staggered by their culture, by the depth of it, the contradictions of violence and love. And I mean, I was so into it. I wanted to become a monk. And those, quite a lot of my early musicals, I did the same when I did South Pacific, which didn't go to Broadway, but I went to Vanuatu, where, I don't know whether you know South Pacific, but the actual island where Nellie Forbush was based, and sort of got involved in their culture and smoked carver, whatever it's called, in religious circles. And like,
so yeah, that's something I love about, in doing my research, is how you would take somebody's culture and learn about it and try to delve into it as much, even like Carmen La
Cubana.
when you did La Cubana. Yeah, when you did that, you went and experienced the culture. So you're not this outsider coming in. You're kind of an outsider taking in all of it.
Yes, it's complex now, and I think in the last couple of years that those. I mean, we all know what's going on in the world, and I think now I have to be more respectful. There is. You don't want to be accused of cultural appropriation, but anything I've done, including A Wonderful World and the story of Louis Armstrong, I've tried to do by steeping myself in that culture, and as an outsider having a ability to view it. That I'm kind of looking forward soon to doing something that, again, I mean, that's totally within what my background is. Except I feel I've done all that. I mean, there's nothing much about England. I did all that with Gilbert and Sullivan. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about England. America, yeah, I'm an honorary American. I mean, I've been here 23 years. So I think my next musical is going to be an American one. So there we go.
All right. Wow.
Yes, I
That's
can't
it.
go and live in Thailand for 3 months.
But it sounds like when you went to Thailand, you enjoyed it. It wasn't like this punishment or something like, oh God, I got to go to Thailand now and sit around. It's like you like really took it in, like,
Yeah.
as if
Uh,
like India, that
the
might be
same,
another culture you might
yeah.
want to go visit.
The, the same with Cuba. So when I did the Carmen in Cuba, it was, I mean, the same kind of full-on experience, and that's why my Carmen La Cubana, which has been everywhere with a Cuban cast, I really want to bring back, because I think Cuba is still a country that needs authentic representation. Wonderful people, dreadful government, but there's something about those people that. So I'm really hoping I can bring that back soon. It's played Paris, London, Berlin. It's played Shanghai. Um, I'd love to bring it to America.
I think, yeah, no, I think it would play well in America now, especially with everything that's going on. I mean, I think
Oh yeah,
this this would probably be the time to do that play, especially with West Side Story coming out and
yes.
them taking that. I think it would really play well. Now, I wanted to backtrack a little bit to Australia, because you went to Australia. What is it about Australia? And you're not the first person I've heard this from, that it kind of feels refreshing. Is it just a freedom that is not there in England that Australia
Yeah.
has?
It embraced me with open arms. I mean, to tell you the truth, when I first came to the States, that gave me the real burst of freedom, which might be odd now with all that's going on. But when I first came to the States, I thought, my God, this place is. It gave me a rush of excitement. I mean, real typical Brit going to New York.
Mhm.
Australia is like a version of England, but far more open, kinder, not up its own backside. And it was the first place that really treated me like a full grown-up director. So I did about 12 operas at the Sydney Opera House, and then did 4 musicals. So I owe everything to Australia. It's a lovely, lovely place, and I've always considered it my second home. I went just before COVID, I think, but I'm not sure I'd ever work there again. I mean, I will if I'm asked. But they're also changing in a way, and Australians are becoming more developing of the talent they have within their own communities. And I think they should go through that a little before now bringing foreigners in.
Yeah.
So
They
I was
they
at the.
seem they seem to be more open to ideas.
Oh yeah.
I know in England, I did a new acting technique that came from Germany, and they tried to present it to England, and it never really caught on with England, but they found the funding they needed through Australia. So it seems like it's got a lot of the feel of England, but without the staunchiness, and it's like,
Yeah.
this is the way we do it.
But they're also learning that no country can be one thing, and as Australia, like this country, is a country of immigrants, and the old, we're all Brits really, and we have the Queen as head of state. It is going to go, because I think we all over the world have to accept that we are a mobile people, and we come to countries. And I was watching that happen in Australia, and get more and more inclusive of the immigration that's happening there, which I think has happened in England too. I'm watching stuff on Netflix from Made in Britain. God, it's grown up. It really is a very grown up culture, and so inclusive. And when
Yeah.
I went back there in January. I was amazed at how England's come on, or the United Kingdom has come on. It, really a little further ahead than we are here in terms of inclusivity. I think
Yeah.
I felt that.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree. Um, yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, a lot of things are all happening at the same. I mean, you can see the parallels even in the politics of,
Yeah.
of all the countries. It's like they're kind of going through the same situation here, this sort of divide, and you can see the two sides, they almost resemble each other in some ways. Um, interesting thing, because you talked about you found a real confidence in farce. Like that gave you a confidence through um but you all right. Talking a little bit about Cameron McIntosh. You do he courts you to do a play. The play is called Cafe Puccini. What why do you think that? I mean, because at that time you had the Phantom that was not received well when they were kind of I'm a little mixed on the thing. It wasn't previews. It was just kind of like what was
Andrew Lloyd Webber has his own festival
that was it.
in a church in his grounds where he previews all his stuff, and he was working with Cameron. Um, and I think my show was an idea, I think, from Andrew about the life of Puccini or something, with actors singing Puccini. And as far as I remember, I helped conceive it, and we did it at Sidmonton the year that he was only showing the first act of Phantom.
Yeah, that was it.
And the first act of Phantom, I remember it now very well. But my show was, oh God, everybody was saying, this is the one. So this
Yeah.
Cafe Puccini went straight to Wyndham's and then closed in 6 weeks. So there you go. But what a baptism, produced by Cameron McIntosh and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and then
Do you think
dying after 6 weeks.
do you think it kind of died because it was the changing of the times? We were going more toward musical theater and getting away from opera style?
Well, as far as I remember, the critics really complained that actors were singing Puccini and not opera singers. So I loved it. I loved the way the actors did it. One guy, God, he was a very young singer, but he was singing the famous Nessun Dorma in English, and I thought he sounded fantastic. And I'd worked with Pavarotti, but suddenly that to hear an actor singing this, I liked it more. But the critics were then very snobby and said, actors shouldn't sing Puccini. I also think I was a very young director. Come on, I don't know. I can barely remember it. But it's the great warning. I know you're an actor, from workshops and going to the stage, the real stage. Workshops can be so deceptive. So you do a workshop, 3 weeks rehearsal, no set, blah, blah. It feels fantastic. But lifting that into the real world of theatre can be very deceptive. And I have learned that over my life. Beware when they say, oh, it's the best workshop I've ever seen, it's going to go to Broadway, blah, blah. It's a hard thing to lift that into the real world of theatre. So never believe a workshop.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's kind of a trap that can get put on you. It's like, oh my God, it's just the most amazing thing ever. And then you put it up, it's like, what was that? That wasn't. And then they're like, it's not. Oh, that wasn't as good. I was fascinated when you were talking about producers. You talked about John Frost, who produced The King and I, and you said he was fantastic because he really, just let you kind of do your thing. Was that a revelation, or was that something you were used to? Or
well, Frost, who became a very wonderful friend, and he's had a wonderful career in Australia, has got Tony Awards. A lot of his stuff has come here. He was like a Cameron to me. You know, Cameron was much further along the line. John was a wonderful, open-hearted enthusiast for the world of theatre, knew his musicals backwards. He sort of did let me, yes. I mean, he let me get away with spending too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was real fun. His office then was his house, and we used to go and have dinner and drinks in his back garden in, you know, the Australian evenings, and he was a joy, and still is a very, very smashing bloke. And God bless him. Yeah, he let me. He was. I mean, perhaps he thought my ideas were great, and he let me do it. But he did let it happen almost as how it was conceived. So good on him, as they say in Australia. Good on him.
Got on him. Got on him.
Good on him.
Now, you've talked about how the importance of sets, and now I think you said you call yourself a set bunny. Would you say? So you kind of start with the place. Is that kind of where the vision kind of begins with a play?
Yeah, I mean, for me, however cheap or however small, however, it has to have a special look. Otherwise, I don't like doing realistic sets. So I like to find a way of expressing the essence of where one wants to be. That's, I guess, what I think. I have done realism, you know. I just don't, you know. I think theatre should have a distillation of what it was, what you want to say with it. So the set for me is the most important element. But you know, designers now. I mean, designers are fantastic.
Yeah.
You work with a designer and you talk about things, and I always say to them, don't give me what I want. Give me something that out of what you've heard that comes out of you.
Yeah.
That's what I try and do.
Interesting. So it kind of starts with an idea, and then you kind of want the set designer to kind of bring in his own feel to it. So you're kind of managing all these different elements that are going around.
Yes, and I will know as soon as I see anything if it's going to inspire me, you know. But as I said, Brian Thompson, with whom I did The King and I, several other productions, who was one of the creators of the Rocky Horror Show, I learned a lot from Brian in terms of distilling. I don't know whether you know the King and I set, his famous set, which was only elephants. I mean, it was so many elephants on stage, all encrusted with jewels and all that, but it sort of defined the essence of the richness of Thai, the richness of the culture, and the sacred elephant. And, you know, it sort of managed to distill it without being at all real. Those are the kind of designs I love.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think you talked about the Mikado, you know, setting it in a cabinet,
A china cabinet,
something, a china cabinet. And I like that idea, because it's different. When the audience comes, they're going to sit and be like, "What is this?" As opposed to if it's a realistic set, their mind can already kind of figure it out in some ways of where it's going. If you start with something abstract like that, the audience can sort of, you know, just sit back and go, well, let's just go with it. You know, we don't know what this is. Our expectations are tampered, and we can just kind of fall into the story, and you've kind of like disarmed them without even them really knowing it. I mean, I don't think consciously they're doing this. It's just subconsciously they're going, oh, what is this? All these elephants. Stuff. And now, okay, that about does it for my interview with Christopher Renshaw. This is the end of part 1. Be on the lookout for part 2. That'll be next week. If you would like to reach Christopher Renshaw, you can find him at Chris Rensh, Rensh, or look up Christopher Renshaw. As always, I want to thank you for listening. You can find me at Justin Yance. If you like this, please consider giving a review and sharing. And thank you for your time. And I will see you next time on the DMF.